Hi, my name is Evelyn. I'm 26 years old. People see my calm smile and think I've had it easy, but behind it, there's a story about family, pride, and one final lesson from Grandma. It happened after she passed away. We gathered at the house she raised us in, the one filled with her memories. But before I could even sit down, my brother looked at me and said, "Get out of this house." My parents just exchanged smug looks and shrugged, as if I didn't belong. I didn't argue. I just stood there quietly because I knew something they didn't. 2 weeks later, when the lawyer read Grandma's will, the room went silent. Every single word confirmed it. The house they told me to leave now legally belonged to me. I turned to them, smiled, and said, "Don't worry, I'll give you time to pack." Their arrogance disappeared in seconds. Grandma had made sure of that. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and if you've ever been underestimated. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because the next story might just remind you karma always has perfect timing. Get out of this house! Caleb's voice slammed through the walls like thunder. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, my suitcase half-zipped, my fingers trembling around the handle. My brother's face was red with anger, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with that same arrogance I had grown used to all my life. Behind him, our parents sat comfortably on the old floral couch, arms folded, watching the scene unfold like it was a movie they'd seen before, one where they already knew the ending. "Don't just stand there, Evelyn," Caleb sneered. "You heard me. You don't belong here anymore." I swallowed hard. My voice felt trapped in my throat. "Caleb, this is Grandma's house. She wanted—" "Grandma's gone," he interrupted sharply, stepping closer. "And this house is part of the family property now. Our property. So pack your things and leave before you embarrass yourself further." I looked at my mother, silently begging her to say something, anything, but she only sighed and exchanged a smug glance with my father. "She's right, dear," my father said with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Your brother's the one managing everything now. You should be grateful we've let you stay this long." That sentence hit me like a slap. Grateful. As if I were some stranger squatting in the home where I'd grown up, the same house where I had spent years taking care of Grandma Eleanor when no one else bothered. My mother leaned back and crossed her legs. "Honestly, Evelyn, you've been nothing but a burden. Maybe it's time you learned to stand on your own 2 feet." Caleb chuckled. "If she even knows how." My eyes darted to the wall behind them, to Grandma's framed photograph, sitting proudly above the mantel. Her smile was soft, kind, the same smile that had comforted me through every lonely night in this house. I could still hear her voice echoing in my mind. "Is greater than, this house will always protect you, my dear. When the time comes, you'll understand." I didn't know what she meant back then, but standing here now, surrounded by the people who were supposed to love me, I began to understand the weight of her words. I turned slowly toward Caleb. "Do you even remember how much she loved this place? She spent her whole life here, taking care of us. You can't just throw me out like I don't matter." He smirked. "You don't." Those 2 words were so sharp they nearly broke me. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I thought I might actually scream. But instead, I felt something shift deep inside, something calm and steady. I zipped my suitcase shut and straightened my back. "Fine," I said quietly. "If that's what you all want." Caleb shrugged, as if my leaving meant nothing. My mother picked at her nails. My father looked back down at the newspaper in his lap. None of them cared. I walked toward the door, my heart pounding. When I reached the threshold, I paused and looked back one last time. "Just remember," I said softly, "this house has a way of revealing the truth." Caleb frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" But I didn't answer. I stepped outside, the wooden door closing behind me with a heavy thud that echoed through the hall. As I walked down the porch steps, the afternoon sky darkened, and a cold wind brushed my face. I didn't know where I would go next, but I knew one thing: Grandma's house wasn't finished with me yet. Somewhere inside, I could almost hear her whisper again, gentle but sure. "Is greater than patience, Evelyn. Let them show who they really are." And as the wind rustled through the trees, I took a deep breath, unaware that this was only the beginning of their downfall. When I was little, I used to think love was something you earned, that if I behaved well enough, helped enough, or stayed quiet enough, my parents would finally see me. But no matter how hard I tried, their eyes were always fixed on one person, Caleb. From the moment he was born, the house revolved around him. My mother would beam proudly when he took his first steps, when he drew a crooked stick figure, when he said anything at all. But when I brought home my first drawing, a picture of Grandma Eleanor's garden, my mother barely glanced at it before saying, "That's nice, dear," and pinning Caleb's messy scribble right over mine. It wasn't just small things, it was everything. When Caleb failed a test, Dad laughed and said, "You'll do better next time, champ." When I got the highest score in my class, he only muttered, "That's what's expected from you, Evelyn." Even birthdays were different. Caleb's came with music, guests, and laughter that filled the whole house. Mine came with store-bought cake and silence. I learned early on not to expect much. But Grandma Eleanor, she was different. She saw me, truly saw me. Every Saturday, I'd sneak into her kitchen, where she'd be kneading dough with flour on her hands and a gentle smile on her face. She'd always set aside a small piece of dough for me to shape. "You have patient hands," she'd say. "Patience builds strength." When the dough baked and the smell filled the air, she'd hum softly the same tune every time and tell me stories about when she was young. "People who crave power always forget one thing, Evelyn," she once said as she wiped her hands on her apron. "Power doesn't last, but kindness roots deep." Those words stayed with me long after she was gone. Still, growing up in that house wasn't easy. Caleb's ego only grew larger with age. By the time he turned 18, he was already strutting around like he owned the world. My parents encouraged it. They called him our future, as if the rest of us didn't exist. When Grandma fell ill, I was the one by her side. I helped her eat, brushed her hair, and read to her when she couldn't sleep. Caleb came around only when there were guests, smiling, pretending to care because appearances mattered more to him than people. I'll never forget the night Grandma looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Evelyn, promise me you won't let them take what's yours." At that moment, I didn't understand what she meant. I thought she was delirious. I held her hand and promised anyway, just to comfort her. A few days later, she was gone. The house felt different after her funeral, colder, quieter, almost hollow. My parents didn't shed many tears. They were too busy talking about what comes next and how to handle the estate. Caleb acted like he'd already inherited everything. He even walked into Grandma's old room and began rearranging things. When I asked him to stop, he turned and said, "It's not like she left anything for you." I remember running to my room that night, crying into my pillow until I couldn't breathe. That was the moment I decided to stop expecting love from them. Weeks passed before a letter arrived from Grandma's lawyer. I didn't know it then, but that single envelope would change everything. At dinner that evening, my father casually mentioned that the lawyer would be handling the final will soon. My mother smiled faintly and said, "I'm sure it's straightforward. Everything will go to Caleb, of course." They all laughed. I didn't. Something inside me whispered that Grandma wasn't done speaking, not yet. And as I watched the candlelight flicker across her framed photo on the wall, I felt it, that quiet, unshakable sense that she had left something behind. Something they wouldn't see coming. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when the letter arrived. I found it wedged between the usual stack of bills and advertisements, but this one felt different. The envelope was thick, its edges slightly worn, with my name written in elegant cursive, the kind only Grandma Eleanor used. For a long moment, I just stared at it. My heart thudded in my chest, as if it already knew that what was inside would change everything. When I finally opened it, a single line caught my eye. "Is greater than Dear Miss Evelyn Harper. Please visit my office at your earliest convenience. It concerns a matter left by the late Mrs. Eleanor Harper." The letter was from Mr. Bennett, Grandma's lawyer. I hadn't seen him since the funeral. He was a tall, quiet man who had always treated Grandma with deep respect. I didn't tell my parents or Caleb about the letter. Somehow, I knew they'd try to stop me. That afternoon, I took the old bus into town and walked the few blocks to Mr. Bennett's small brick office. The room smelled faintly of old books and cedar. He looked up from behind his desk and smiled kindly. "Evelyn," he said, standing to greet me. "I was hoping you'd come." I sat down, my palms sweating. "Is something wrong?" He shook his head slowly. "No, my dear, something's very right." He reached into his drawer and pulled out a sealed brown envelope. My breath caught when I saw the handwriting's soft looping letters that spelled my name, Evelyn. Mr. Bennett slid it across the desk. "Your grandmother left this for you. She wanted me to give it to you personally, after her affairs were settled." I opened it carefully, afraid it might vanish if I moved too fast. Inside was a handwritten letter and another document folded neatly behind it. The letter read, "Is greater than, my dear Evelyn. If you are reading this, it means I have gone to rest. You were my heart in this house, my light on the dimmest days. You cared when no one else did. This home, with all its memories, laughter, and tears, belongs to you now. I have changed my will, so that the house and everything within its gates will pass to your name. They may not understand it now, but one day they will. Be strong, my dear. This house is your inheritance and your protection. Love always. Grandma Eleanor." My hands shook as I unfolded the second paper, the official property deed. There it was, in bold black letters, "Owner, Evelyn Harper." I couldn't believe it. The house. Grandma's house. My house. Mr. Bennett smiled softly as he watched my expression. She was very clear about her wishes. "You are the sole owner, Evelyn. The documents are fully registered and sealed. No one can contest it." Tears welled in my eyes. "But she never said anything." "She wanted you to discover it when the time was right," he replied gently. "She trusted your heart and your patience." For a long moment, I sat there in silence. I should have felt overjoyed, but instead, I felt a mix of gratitude and fear. I could already imagine Caleb's rage, my parents' disbelief. Mr. Bennett must have noticed my hesitation. "You don't need to tell them yet," he said. "Sometimes, silence is its own kind of protection." I nodded, clutching the papers to my chest as if they were fragile. "Thank you," I whispered. As I stepped out into the cool afternoon air, the world looked different, sharper, brighter. The old trees that lined the street seemed to whisper in the breeze. When I got home that evening, Caleb was sitting in the living room, watching television. He barely looked up when I walked in. "You're late," he muttered. I smiled faintly. "Just had something important to take care of." He snorted. "What, a job interview for a maid?" I didn't answer. I just walked past him, clutching the envelope in my bag. He had no idea that everything around him, the walls, the furniture, even the ground beneath his feet already belonged to me. And for the first time in years, I felt quietly powerful. 2 months passed after that visit to Mr. Bennett's office. I kept Grandma's letter and the house deed hidden inside a small wooden box beneath my bed. Every night before I slept, I'd take them out, run my fingers over the paper and whisper, "Thank you, Grandma." But even though I held the truth, I didn't feel ready to use it. Something in me still hoped my family would change, that maybe, if I just stayed quiet a little longer, they'd learn to see me differently. When I finally decided to return home, it wasn't out of weakness. I wanted to feel close to Grandma again. I wanted to walk through her garden, breathe the air she loved, and remember who I was before their cruelty made me doubt it. When I arrived that morning, the house looked the same, tall, proud, but tired. The paint on the porch was fading, and the flowers Grandma once tended had wilted. Caleb's car sat in the driveway shining and new. He must have used Grandma's savings for it. I didn't even have to ask. I knocked on the door softly. My mother opened it, her face twisting into something between surprise and annoyance. "Oh, it's you." "Good to see you too, Mum," I said quietly. She sighed. "Don't start being clever. Come in, if you must." When I stepped inside, everything felt smaller. The warmth that once filled the house was gone, replaced by a strange, heavy silence. The curtains were drawn, the scent of old coffee hung in the air, and I noticed that many of Grandma's photos had been taken down. I frowned. Where are Grandma's pictures? Your brother thought it was time for a fresh start, she replied. No need to keep old things cluttering the walls. Old things. That's what Grandma had become to them, something to be cleared away. Caleb strolled into the room wearing his usual smirk. Well, look who's back, he said, tossing his car keys on the table. Didn't expect you to show your face here again. I had nowhere else to go, I lied. He grinned. That figures. For the next few days, I stayed mostly in Grandma's old room. It was the only place that still felt alive. I could almost smell her perfume, faint and floral, lingering in the air. I dusted her shelves, polished the picture frames, and restored everything they had carelessly ignored. One evening, while sorting through her things, I discovered a small diary tucked inside the drawer of her bedside table. Its cover was faded blue with the initials E.H. written neatly on the front. Curious, I opened it and began to read. Is greater than June 3rd. Evelyn looked tired today. I worry they are breaking her spirit, but she carries kindness in her eyes. That's something they'll never understand. Is greater than August 11th. Harold and Margaret see Caleb as their pride, but pride can be dangerous. It blinds people. One day, they'll see who truly deserved this home. Each line made my chest ache. Grandma had seen everything, the favoritism, the cruelty, the silence I'd learned to live with. She'd known. Tears blurred the ink as I kept reading. Is greater than, if they push her away, I hope she remembers this house is hers, in more ways than one. I pressed the diary to my heart. It felt like her arms were around me again. But outside that room, the air was different. I could hear my parents whispering with Caleb in the living room. Words like property, buyers, and papers slipped through the cracks of the door. That night, I stood quietly in the hallway, listening as my mother said, "We'll need her signature to sell. Just tell her it's for taxes or repairs. She's too soft to ask questions." Caleb laughed. "Don't worry. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her." I walked back to Grandma's room, calm but trembling inside. They didn't know that the only name on that deed was mine. As I sat on the edge of Grandma's bed, I whispered into the darkness, "You were right, Grandma. They'll show who they really are." And the next morning, they finally did. The morning began with the sharp sound of Caleb's voice echoing down the hall. "Evelyn, come downstairs now." I set down Grandma's diary and took a slow breath before walking out of her room. My heart was steady, my hands calm. I already knew what was coming. In the living room, my parents sat on one side of the table, their faces tight with self-importance. Caleb stood in the middle, waving a stack of papers in the air like a man presenting evidence. "What's this about?" I asked softly. He grinned, that smug, familiar grin that made the air feel heavy. "We've decided to sell the house. There's a buyer coming tomorrow. All we need is your signature." My father nodded in agreement. "It's for the best, Evelyn. The money will be shared fairly among us." I almost laughed. Fairly. That word never existed in this family. My mother slid a pen across the table. "Sign here, dear. We'll take care of everything else." I looked at the papers but didn't reach for them. "And what if I don't want to?" Caleb snorted. "You don't get to decide that. You've been living here rent-free for months. You should be thankful we're letting you stay at all." I tilted my head slightly, studying his face. There it was again, the arrogance, the belief that he was untouchable. My silence must have annoyed him because he slammed his palm on the table. "You're signing this, Evelyn. Do you hear me? This isn't your house." That was it, the moment, the one Grandma must have known would come. I reached into my bag and pulled out a neatly folded folder. My hands didn't shake this time. I laid it on the table and slowly opened it. "What's that?" my mother asked, frowning. "The truth," I said. They all leaned closer as I slid out the deed. It was the same paper Mr. Bennett had given me weeks ago, official, sealed, and stamped. The title was written clearly at the top. Property owner, Evelyn Harper. My father blinked. "What? What is this?" I met his eyes calmly. It's the house deed. Grandma changed her will months before she passed. She left everything, the house, the land, everything in her name to me. The room fell silent. For the first time in years, I had their full attention. Caleb's face turned pale, his mouth slightly open. You're lying! I slid another document across the table, a notarized copy from Mr. Bennett's office. You can check with the lawyer if you like, he'll confirm it. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came out. My father rubbed his forehead as if trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Caleb looked from the papers to me, his voice trembling with anger. You tricked us! No, I said softly. You tricked yourselves. You were so sure I was weak that I'd never stand up to you. But Grandma knew better. My mother's eyes filled with something between shame and disbelief. Evelyn, you mean to tell me she left everything to you? Yes, I said, standing tall. Because I was the one who stayed when everyone else walked away. I took care of her. I listened. And she knew what this house meant. Caleb's fists clenched, but there was nothing he could do. The truth had already burned through the lies they'd built around themselves. I gathered the papers, slipped them back into the folder, and walked toward the window. The morning sun poured in, lighting the room in gold, warm, almost forgiving. This house isn't leaving the family, I said quietly. It's just leaving your control. When I turned back, their faces were pale and speechless. The arrogance that once filled the room had vanished, replaced by disbelief and the bitter taste of defeat. As I walked toward the stairs, my eyes caught Grandma's photograph on the wall. Her smile looked a little brighter now, as if she'd been waiting for this moment too. I whispered, "Thank you, Grandma." And for the first time in my life, I felt free not just because the house was mine, but because I had finally claimed what she always knew I deserved. Respect. Behind me, my family sat in silence, surrounded by the walls they thought they owned, but never truly understood. The house had spoken, and it had chosen me. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more.